Almighty God, we acknowledge that we have a responsibility to look after your creation, especially this region we call Barcaldine Regional Council. We are conscious that our decisions are going to affect deeply the people we have come here to serve. Assist us to exercise respect for councillors, staff, and for the people of our region. Help us in this meeting to act wisely, justly, and intelligently in all our deliberations. Thank you, Lord, for the privilege of both leading and serving, and assist us to do these well. And then condolences for Mrs. Edith King of Jericho and the late Mr. Merv Schwartz and family, formerly of Jericho. Are there any others? Minute silence, please. Thank you. There being no apologies, all staff present, all councillors present. Take this opportunity to pay my respects to the custodians of the land upon which we meet and their elders, both past, present and emerging. Declarations of prescribed conflict of interest, please, Councillor Plum. Councillor Arthur.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just have a question. 3.55, the project report budget carried forward. The motion doesn't particularly say that it's an amendment of the budget, but I take it as ordinary business.
The discussions will be what councillors wish to carry forward.
Yep.
Which councillors don't want to carry forward.
Yep. So that...
There's not going to be.
No, it's just because previous experience or ongoing experience, if it's not an amendment to the budget, will I have?
It will be an amendment at the end because obviously we update. Where's the conflict that you're at?
Well, because
There's job in there that
it doesn't necessarily say amend the budget. It does speak to it later in the, but the actual resolution is an amendment to our budget.
It's the directive from council what we move forward into this year to amend at that point, and that'll come back at the quarterly review.
Councillor, I see what you're saying. I think that the officer's recommendation is with the intent to amend the budget or to update the budget. We will ensure those words are specifically used.
Yep, that's right.
In that it, carries forward those projects identified into capital works and operating budget. So I'm convinced there's enough of a connection there. We'll make it clear when we get to that.
Right, that would be greatly appreciated. And I just flagged 3.6.1, the works report. My employer is mentioned, but as we're only receiving input, unless councillors or officers have an intention to delve into that detail.
If we acknowledge that, you've acknowledged it now. If someone, I've got notes all over that report, so I can't say where it is at the moment, but if we get to there, we acknowledge Michael Ballman Transport as your employer. And
Other than that, no, Mr. Mayor.
And they're all pre-declared, so we don't need to go through the formal declaration process. Read back, councillors, if you do wish to ask the question, just flag with me that it is regarding, and we can ask Councillor Arthur to leave at that point. Councillor Hanson.
Not that I'm aware of, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Gleeson.
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor. And I'm not aware of any for myself. Declaration, does any councillor present believe any other councillor present may have overlooked a prescribed conflict of interest? Being none, declared conflicts of interest, please. Councillor Plum. Councillor Arthur.
No, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Hanson.
Not that I'm aware of.
Councillor Gleeson.
Not that I'm aware of.
Councillor Peoples.
Yes, Mr Mayor, just my previously declared sculpture trail conflict of interest, the project progress report 3.5.2 has mentioned, and also the project report 3.5.5 and the annual operational plan review 3.4.6 all mention that within the report.
3612, is it or not? The workshop report?
No, I don't
doesn't?
think it
Okay.
does this time.
So it's
I
fine.
looked
Yep.
through it again this morning, but maybe I've missed it. But, yeah. And I just, as previous, I would like to participate in receiving the reports. However, I acknowledge that the eligible councillors must now determine pursuant to section 150 ES of the Local Government Act whether I may participate.
Councillors, your previous decision with respect to Councillor Rogers in direct relevance to these agenda items has been to remain, for her to allow to remain in the room for the receival and discussion on the report. Does any councillor present wish to propose a change to that? The status quo allowing Councillor Rogers to remain instead. Okay, I don't believe I have any declarable conflict of interest. Does anyone present believe any other councillor present may have a declarable conflict of interest that they have overlooked? There being none. Right, confirmation of the minutes. Can I have somebody move, please, that we confirm the minutes of the 12th July meeting? Councillor Hanson, sorry, that we received, yep. So Councillor Hanson moves, Councillor Gleeson seconds. Those in favour? Kim receiving
Oh,
them?
yeah.
7-0. Councillors, any errors, omissions or alterations that you may have discovered? There's one on the screen. Is there any further down?
No.
That's it. Adding Brett as an apology. It was overlooked. Councillor.
Mr Mayor, CEO's report is not in the minutes.
That we received the CEO's report.
It's not in there, it's, yeah, and also the delegations, I'd like to see them in there, for transparency purposes, basically.
The whole register. Yep.
Yeah.
So what was the motion though? Can we grab the minutes? If the motion didn't list them individually but referred to a document, you may have to do that via another means.
Delegations weren't
Delegations can be placed on the
listed.
website.
We'll just have a look at what that actual
They weren't
motion
in the
was.
agenda, so no one has actually got a look at them, anyone.
It's on our website, on council documents.
I can't recall who moved that we received the CEO's report, so we're going to have to refer to the video for that.
Oh, we're just checking now.
Because that wasn't in the agenda, so it would be in the minutes instead, so people get to read it.
Oh, you mean, sorry,
The
what the
report.
CEO actually said.
Yeah. When it wasn't in the agenda, it was tabled at the minute, at the meeting.
Oh, so you want to add it to the minutes, the report, is that's what you say? Oh,
Well, it
sorry.
can't be added to the minutes,
No.
but it can be retrospectively added to the agenda, which is still online. Because the minutes is just simply a record of what was moved and seconded at that time. But the report wasn't received in confidential session, so
No.
it can just be retrospectively added to the agenda.
Is that the right place for it? Because it wasn't in the agenda to start with, so.
No, but it can be a
wasn't, like,
late business item.
publicly-
It can be listed as a late business item or a document that's tabled. The minutes doesn't, we receive all manner of reports from presentations, for example, from say DCQ, where we can make the content of the meeting public, but we can't add it to the minutes unless the motion at the day specifically called for the document in question to be lodged as a record of entry or entered as a.
Yeah, so it was taken at the meeting.
So
We
that,
acknowledge it.
people that.
The delegations, there was nothing listed, it just that as was the resolution.
But they will be publicly available for people to.
The delegations, you want them, oh, I get what you mean.
If
Delegations,
not in the
Mr. Mayor,
minutes.
delegations have to be publicly available.
Yeah, there's no choice with them.
No, because of our policies of council. Ours to registers.
I would just think that like if that report wasn't in the agenda, but it was tabled at the meeting, that it would be in the minutes, that's all.
It can be made public unless the resolution expressly calls for it to be entered into the minutes. That's where it falls over.
Yeah.
But there's no reason why,
There was nothing in it that can't be.
no, it wasn't received in closed session, so there's no, it's a public document. So, did we move that the CEO's report be received though? That's what,
Yes.
that's what
Yeah, we did.
Yes.
Okay. That's what I thought you meant, sorry.
It was received, yeah.
So, we've got one amendment, and we may make a note that the CEO's report of the we don't have any choice with the delegation register, it automatically will be online.
I've made a note and I'll update the agenda with that report.
Maybe we just put on the public facing side of it, including late items or including tabled items, so that anyone looking for it sees that old agenda has been updated. Well, and it includes
Because
the,
otherwise they wouldn't know.
yep, I've already looked at that, what have I got to look at it again for, yeah.
I usually write version 2, but I'll put updated.
Right, thank you. But that won't expressly go in this resolution because we're actually only looking at the formal record any further. Can I have somebody move then that the minutes with the following amendment for the 12 July meeting be confirmed? Councillor Hanson, seconded Councillor Plum. Any further debate? There being none, those in favour? 7-0. Petitions. Do any councillors present have any petitions? Or officers, sorry, in the correct form? There being none, I would like to now move a series of mayoral minutes, please. They are on the screen in front of you. The first of them is that this meeting of the Barcaldine Regional Council acknowledges the terrific efforts of the Barcaldine Senior Rugby League, known colloquially as the Sanguanas, in winning the 2022 West Rugby League Grand Final to become premiers for the season. Terrific effort for a team who came into the semis 2 weeks before the semis, the very bottom of the whole league ladder. They climbed their way into the top 4 and never lost a game. And having been an official for 3 of those 5 games, it was very inspiring to watch a team pull together the way they did, and more importantly, the way they pulled the community together, or the way the community pulled together to support them in grand final week, but even in the weeks leading up to it. Sport's not everything in rural towns. In fact, it's often the thing that people realise is the only thing, but there's a lot of culture and community spirit that gets overlooked. But in this particular case, I think the effort of the football side here in Barcaldine has been an extremely inspiring thing for the community. Start of the year, it looked very unlikely that they'd get off the ground, which is a cliched thing to say. Every year, every small town struggles, but for a young man to step up and take ownership of that side in the way he did, and accept responsibility and then deliver a premiership for his team and his club is commendable. And I think as a matter of record, I've already drafted a letter that I will be sending, but I thought it appropriate to give councillors a chance to acknowledge the terrific effort of our team. Councillor Plum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for those kind words.
Sorry,
Thank you for those kind words.
my pleasure. Any other councillor wish to comment? I'll move that. I'll call for a second. Thank you, Councillor Plum. Those in favour? Carried, 7-0. And equally, Saturday was a prestigious day for people within the Barcaldine Regional Council. The next resolution that I'd like to move as a mayoral minute is that we acknowledge the terrific achievement of the Alpha Show Society Young Ambassador Cassandra Wortman in being named the statewide Queensland Chamber of Agricultural Society's Youth Ambassador for 2022. That competition has been running now since 2003. I was fortunate enough to be that recipient of that in 2004, and for it to come from a small Western community is a terrific achievement. Young Cassandra is the secretary of that Show Society as well. Has recently moved to the area, but has got a long, passionate involvement in agriculture, and for our council area to be now represented as the statewide future for the show movement is terrific promotion and publicity for our community, and a terrific individual achievement for that young lady. So I'd like to move that as well, and open for debate for any other. Councillor Peebles.
I was going to second what you moved, Mr Mayor.
Any further comments? Thank you, Councillor Peebles, seconds. And I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Thank you. Councillors, just a quick break from meeting agenda. Those sort of motions are easy, and we will formally write to both of them as a result of that, both the Rugby League and to Cassandra. They need not be mayoral minutes. In future, if you're aware of significant achievements, it might be a young school student achieving through to, representing Central West, Northwest school sports. There could be some a Stedford achievement from one of the school children or a member of the community who have done well. Those sort of motions are only can be brought from the floor, from a councillor. You've just got to give notice. So if something happens after the agenda goes out, please give it to me. I'll happily lodge it as a mayoral minute for you and then throw to you to speak to it. But I think it's important that we start to formally enter into the record the achievements of our community people and groups in this way. It's tokenistic, but somewhere in 100 years' time when someone's writing a book about Barcaldine, they will read council minutes, and to see those names in there will then cause them to go and have a bit of a look at something else that might have happened in the community. So that opportunity is open to all of you. I've picked on two today, but in doing some homework around other councils and community recognition, I've seen this as something that they do, and I thought it was worth us trying, but certainly not limited to any one town, sport, or the prerogative of the mayor whether it happens. If you're aware of it, please just lodge it on a notice of motion before Thursday the week before, and it will go in the agenda under your cover. If it's happened, as both of them have in the interleading period, just let me know and I'll make sure it's the very first item of on the agenda. Confidential reports, I believe there are nil. My information report, I'm 321. There's a very high level view of the meetings that I've had since the last meeting. Within each of those, there's actually been now 2 meetings of the Queensland Beef Corridor Steering Committee and a third coming next Friday since then. Bush Councils was a massive event, and there was a lot of work went in and around that, and opportunity for sideline meetings, but I would also like to acknowledge the councillors who other councils recognised for being there and playing an active role in the sessions. They said it was great that so many of the host councillors and staff were able to join in the sessions, and the opportunities outside of that to host, and literally that's what we do as a host council, and it was great that there were so many of you to share the local hosting with, whether it be at one of the social functions or at coffee or in one of the breakouts. So that was acknowledged, and my thanks to everybody. And Angela's not in the room, but will be later for her reports. Obviously, massive amount of work went into that locally by a significant number of staff, but none more so than Angela in what she did there, and was duly recognised at the event. But we will mention her in dispatches when she comes back to the room as well. number of those meetings, there's opportunities to discuss at other stages today, but does anyone have any, you'll note Barcaldine Rec Park Weeds is in about, I think every single officer that was at that meeting, including me, have got it listed, so that will be discussed at the relevant stage, and sooner leave it to an officer's report though. Better place for it.
Through you, Mr Mayor, what sort of, have you got any new information or anything about the bullying, Queensland bullying? Central Queensland.
So yes, that there was 4 options tabled. The number 1 option is that Rapid provide an investment prospectus with the feasibility study done to prospective investors to choose to invest. It is the other options called for council/Rapid ownership or part ownership. The directors haven't made a formal investment decision, so I've got to be careful how far I go, but the considered opinion is that it's better if it be invested and run by brewers or somebody who is intent. But having already done the work around the concept scale, that work, and I won't disclose the town, sufficient to say it's not Barcaldine or any of our towns, the location that has the best cost benefit ratio is outside the BRC area. So BRC, like the other communities that aren't identified as the most attractive financially, are listed with their cost breakups there. We saw that report. It's still an in-confidence report, which is why you haven't got it. The board has still not made a decision on it. And even then, I'm not sure that they would release that in its totality, but they will release the options, obviously. So, yeah, it's probably good news for the region. Councillor Rogers, I wouldn't be building a sense of expectation that we're likely to see as a result of that work a brewing company start in Barcaldine anytime soon. But is it possible in the region? Most definitely. And they've done some very involved, detailed work to identify those locations and costs. And so it's not just a napkin exercise anymore. It's quite advanced, a piece of work. They've had economists and brewers consulting on the project. There was considerable funds received to do that feasibility work, so they've been able to do it properly.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
And yeah, the Rec Park weeds, we will definitely go into substantial detail. We had a very long meeting, but I think the most appropriate time for that will be in District Manager Lawrence's report, because, so we'll discuss that probably then, with your indulgence. Can somebody move my report be received, please? Councillor Gleeson, second to Councillor Rogers. Any further discussion? Those in favour? 7-0. Can I have somebody move Shane's report be received, please? Councillor Plum, Councillor Peoples, those in favour? 7-0. Shane, you have the report.
Councillor, I can take it as being read. Specifically, I'd like to sort of acknowledge the return of Brett and Sarmad. Came back to the table, so we had a full complement of senior staff around the table, so we could start delving into our budgets and our processes, which has been a good debate. Obviously, there's been some changes there. We'll talk about that one a bit later. We'll continue with some staff. We had our staff here last week doing their treated water. Very encouraging, the enthusiasm of our staff to learn some new skills. We spent a bit of time out of the treatment plant as well. There were some photos coming around that Angela took just to show them their enthusiasm, a lot of smiles, but they're learning a lot as well as we construct our new treatment plant as well. I think if we take it as being read and I open the floor to questions, it's probably the best way. Does that work?
Thank you. Councillor Rogers.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I was just, the COVID impacting our service delivery. I actually emailed you previously just about our policy. Just knowing that it's going to keep affecting us probably for the next decade, like should council actually develop a new policy, like councillors develop a policy around COVID and what should happen in the next 10 years, or is that COVID policy still really, is it still relevant? Like something, it's probably the one that was done first started.
At the height of it.
Yeah.
It's always something we should be reviewing anyway.
Yeah.
The real test is how we hope that something happens. There was a real test in the last 2 months with the number of staff impacted. We follow the health guidelines to the letter. There's no harm in the council actually developing our internal processes better of how we deal with it. The challenge we've got is that it's emerging all the time. So what the impact was with last run of COVID is probably different to the next run of I think we have to be fluid and adaptable, but I'm always happy to review that as a council internal policy about how we get that information out. So.
Probably, I guess the question was, I don't think we've got an actual council drafted policy, have we?
No, we have not.
Like,
not
should we actually do council draft a policy around that as well? Like,
I'm happy for council to have a position on how we deal with it. It makes sense, most councils do.
Expanding on that, Councillor Rogers, is it something that fits within our, would it be an addendum to an existing policy such as workplace health and safety or HR or is it, I mean, I understand right now everyone has COVID-centric standalone stuff. If it's going to be an evolving thing, I think you're right, who knows the legacy of this, it could be 10 years, it could be 2 or 3 years, but is incorporating, you know, and this is not a question we need to answer today, but is adopting it, some recognition in some formal policy, is it a part of a broader suite of policies or is it a standalone? I guess is a question.
I can through the meeting. My thoughts on this would be it would form part of our BCP, our business continuity planning, as part of our pandemic approach, because it could be influenza, it could be COVID, it could be a number of different things, which will impact the organisation. So an updated BCP would reflect, and that would bring in safety, it would bring in staffing, and bring in the whole process. So my suggestion would be I'd bring a BCP update back to council, which incorporates and might guide council on how you want us to develop these things. I haven't seen our latest BCP, how long since we've done that one?
Well, we did update it with the pandemic.
It's fairly recent. We did, after the pandemic, we did update it to include that. As part of the enterprise bargaining, there was a request from employees to include a clause about pandemic leave in the enterprise bargainings, but we've rejected that. We didn't want to lock council into, once it's in, that agreement is there forever. And every council's locked into that forever. So, and really, the only policy that we had was formulated right at the start, before we really knew what the effects were going to be. So it's out of date as well.
I guess the other thing is for the first 2 years of the pandemic, it didn't matter what a council policy said, we were governed by the EHDs, the Emergency Health Directives, whereas they are now, you know, very quickly stepping back, winding back. All of the agencies like health and, well, not so much health, although they are as well, but police have disbanded task force that enforce those directives. So what the onus is coming on the business, and realistically local government is a business in that respect in terms of employment, about how individually you deal with COVID management. I mean, we're probably not that far away from, you know, the advice that I get in a number of meetings I attend is we're not that far away from the requirement to isolate being dropped from the state as well. That's, you know, that's the next step. So, and I'm not saying that it's going to happen tomorrow, it might not happen for 12 months, but that's the last restriction to be wound back because, as somebody said before, I think Shane said, pandemic is not limited to COVID, and there's no requirement to stay at home when you're sick with any other illness, like even notifiable ones like measles and
monkeypox.
Sorry?
Monkeypox.
That is declarable. They have to be isolated with that one. I'm not going to say the name again, but yeah. So good point. Let's have a look at this through. I think the options that have been talked about.
Yeah, the idea of bringing something like a council workshop and provide some guidance about how you'd like to manage it.
Further questions?
The other question is just the draft project and business improvement. Is that is that like added on to our business, like so on top of our business optimisation plan and with QTC?
It'll incorporate, I'm working with QTC now, so we've engaged them again. So they're back in the mix to help support in that place. But the project format we gave councillors last week, our district managers are starting to use that now for our upcoming projects, so we can do the analysis to get a full scoping back to council to show where we're going. So we'll have some trials and some early examples of that coming to the next meeting.
Thank you.
Is there another question? Okay. Councillor Plum.
Through you, Mr Mayor Shane, you visited our visitor information centres, and possibly over all of them, volunteers are hard to find. With the Barcaldine one, do you see it, maybe we could enhance the retail side of it to be able to pay someone a few hours a day to come? Do you see that sort of area, or?
I think in everyone there's opportunity. I guess the council needs to provide some guidance on how far you'd like to go in that space.
Yeah.
The
How do
number
we
of,
enhance it? Like, how do we?
one thing I've noticed, especially on weekends with the town sort of closing down with food venues and everything else, the amount of tourists that are pulling up walk through the doors, there's an audience there.
Yeah.
So we've definitely got opportunities to promote not just the region, but what we do within the region, as well as the tourist opportunities. So there's opportunities everywhere. I guess from council, there's some guidance of what you'd like to explore.
That's all. I just wanted to know, just how we could make it easier, or where can we follow it?
Our volunteers do a great job, and they definitely are very passionate about what they do.
Yeah.
One thing that I've noticed when the tourists are coming out, they all really enjoy the conversations they have with their locals. So we do that very well. It's how do we give them the tools to keep coming back, I guess. More volunteers would be great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Going around the room in order, Councillor Arthur.
I might thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Hines.
Thanks, Mr.
Councillor Gleeson.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're okay. Sorry, I thought you were okay, thank you. I have the floor now. I'm going to
Embrace yourself.
Councillor Peoples.
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Thank you.
Mr Mayor, just thoughts.
So, Councillor Rogers.
Just the community member in relation to the town common meeting, was that within new ideas, or was it just,
It's existing user.
okay?
I just didn't name them.
Yeah, they didn't, it wasn't with some new business like venture idea?
No, it's
or-
existing discussion around the management of the common.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, 332, please. Can I have somebody move that we received information correspondence report? Councillor Peoples, seconded by Councillor Arthur.
Yes.
Yeah, I was trying to work out which one of you was the fastest. Put your hand up, was close call. Those in favour? 7-0. Two items here, the review of the Office of the Information Commissioner and the detailed report from Outback Futures regarding the Head Yakka Conversations follow-up report. Questions about any or all of this, or officers wish to draw our attention individually or taken as read? Councillor, sorry.
As councillor in a position on the OIC, would you like to formulate a response or participate?
I have a view that they'll do whatever they want to do anyway. That's my pragmatic view, but yeah, does council want to? Well, you don't have to do it in session. I appreciate you've had this agenda for 4 days. There's significant, 4 or 5 days, considerable decision to be made later. We have until the 2nd of September for that. If you take it as read for now and wish to ask if we can put something, council can put something together that reflects your views at such time after this meeting if you wish to provide them through to staff. If we get conflicting thoughts from councillors, we may seek to lodge them individually or identify the different views of councillors in a simplified document in that respect. I just wanted to reference the Head Yakka Community Conversations Report. Councillor Rogers, you spoke to this before we received this formal report because you attended at least one, maybe two of these around three. And they've put together a pretty detailed summary here.
Yep.
Councillor?
It's a very good report, but I just want to acknowledge the participation of everyone in the communities that I went. It was really positive, and the one thing that came through in every community was just, I think people want to focus on their health and well-being and their fitness. Those are probably the only things that, not the only things that we can improve on, but improvements in those areas would be really appreciated.
One thing that was definitely picked up, and it probably set three communities aside in that there's not significant access to gym, although I'm going to speak through my hat on Muttaburra, but there's not really a formal gym there, nor is there in Jericho or Alpha. However, the latest round of community gambling support saw a $60,000 grant for a community group in Alpha to establish a community gym, which is fantastic, and councillors that attended the Showgrounds precinct meeting in Alpha saw where that could be set up, which
Is that where it will be?
it will be. Well, CEO's got to agree to that with the district manager, but it's a council-owned shed that's used twice a year. So that delivers one more community, so that gives 3 of our 5 access to gyms, and I guess if it's something that through future budget deliberations or grant opportunities, council sees the way to install maybe different styles of gyms, outdoor gym equipment.
Exactly. The outdoor gyms are really popular, and there's so much equipment, and there must be funding available for those types of gyms, and everyone's got access at any time of the day. Isaac Regional Council have installed a number of them to cater for their shift workforce, so that they're coming and going, and they can go for a walk, go for a run. Clonmel, Moranbah, both have got very established external. I was there at Claremont this weekend and was looking at that exact thing, their gym all down that walkway. It's just, you wouldn't even need a gym. Yeah. The equipment that's available now is way more advanced than even what we've got down here at the Bear Creek. Yeah.
So that just might be something councillors to keep in the back of your mind. Okay, any more questions about the information? Can I have somebody move that we receive the economic development report, please? Councillor Plum, seconded Councillor Gleeson. Those in favour? Carried. Any further conversation about this as the day unfolds?
This is questions from report, emerging project with the truck stop development.
We've received that correspondence. Is there a couple of things that have been checked? We'll have a discussion about that in a briefing session later. It's not really enough to go further with at this stage, but we need to seek some further advice.
Through Mr. Mayor, the visioning sessions that we did, will we be getting back, obviously we'll be getting back together to develop that further?
We will. A couple of things have happened since then. Morgan is actually now the acting CEO of Rapid. So yes, I can't even say that we've put a finger on when it's going to be.
Yeah.
When he's probably not the acting CEO of Rapid would be a suggestion. I had unfortunately had to step out of that meeting for a period of time. So I've got to get my head back around that. When Morgan's not CEO, then we might pull together another day to perhaps even unpack it all and focus on a couple of areas, and we may be able to do that at one of our 2-day meetings where we have a briefing session for half day and something like that to really get a bit more committed on that. Well in advance of our next budget meetings. Information report. Can I have somebody move that Brett's Deputy CEO report be received, please? Councillor Arthur, seconded Councillor Plum. Brett.
Mr. Mayor, we can take it as read. Obviously I've been away, so there's been only limited activity since I've been back.
Couple of your items here though are decision reports for later on, like the nursing services and so forth, so we'll clearly go through that when we get to that agenda item.
I'll just mention the police safety roundtable, which we attended. It's an all-day event, and I think it was really worthwhile for all parties to hear what the issues are in the community, or in the communities of the region.
I agreed, Brett. We didn't put any fanfare around it because at the end of the meeting we decided that it was so important, yet still so early, that we didn't want to distract it by politics. So there hasn't been any publicity or reference to it other than that there'll be working groups established. The chairs have yet to sign off on the minutes. When we have done that, councillors, I'll do send it through to you. A couple of councillors were able to come along. But engagement from all our officers and all of their officers and getting us on up to speed, Brett, was really good. Questions for Brett? There is stony silence, 342. Can I have something?
Just a vote, please.
Oh,
Mr.
sorry,
Mayor.
those in favour of receiving that? Did we even move in second? Yeah, we
Yes.
did. Yeah, 7-0. Thank you. Carried. Planning and Development Report. Can I have somebody move that we receive that report? Councillor Plum, seconded Councillor Hanson. Those in favour? 7-0. Questions?
Mr. Mayor, we've I've included the final statistics for 2022 up to June, as well as then starting the 23 statistics. So as you can see that we've had substantially more development over the last 12 months, 6.1 million for the 22 financial year compared to 3.6 million in 21.
Ebbs and flows, but that's a clear upward trend from 2019 anyway. You know, there's a little bit of a blip there in 21, but if you average it out, there's substantial northward trajectory on the chart. Okay. Any questions about any element of that report? Right. Public consultation for the new planning scheme. Brett?
Mr. Mayor, the state has completed their state interest review of our new proposed planning scheme. So the next phase of that process is to go to public consultation. We have to nominate a period of 40 business days that will occur within, and so we've suggested some dates which will allow, once the public consultation is concluded at the end of that period, we then have 20 business days to formulate a response to that, any feedback that we receive from the public. That will potentially give us the opportunity to do that at the December meeting And depending on the feedback, potentially adopt at the December meeting. However, if the feedback requires any major amendments to the scheme, it will have to go back to the state for further review. So we've set the dates up so it potentially could be adopted in December, but that will depend on public feedback. So there's a substantial amount of work to be done prior to the 5th of September because every landholder who is affected by the scheme needs to receive a letter, a direct correspondence to say that they've either been put in a flood zone or their zoning has changed from the old scheme. We've had to set up a specific website for this consultation period, special email address. So we're working with real planning to get that done in time for the 5th of September.
I just go back to this last point you raised, second last point you raised. So in the proposed, it's not now proposed, in the draft planning scheme as it is, because it's moved from proposed, now that the state's accepted it, it is Council's official draft planning scheme. In there is some prescriptive changes around what is both accepted and allowable development within the flood zone, specifically in Alpha. Will that necessitate advice individually to each of those landholders?
If they're affected by it, yes.
Even if it's only potential future affectation, as in like if they propose to build something that was allowed under the old scheme but would, and if it's allowed but it's now changed to impact accessible, will that still require individual direct written correspondence?
Should. And any impact on, it's best to notify early, so it's dealt with. That way then there's no surprises in 2 years' time someone says we should have 12 months.
And so effectively that would be the biggest area affected because it is harsh in terms of, or stark, the change there. Outside of that, if I come to the likes of Barcaldine, there's some zoning changes, but it's a lot of it's just name change, isn't it? You know, there's not substantial impact.
So it's not as big as what you're talking about.
So it'd be
because
like-
it actually displaces people. Here,
Well, it won't displace them, it just limits their future
that's
development.
where it's going.
For example, the mixed use zone goes so that anyone affected by that would have to be told, this is your new zone.
The residences, so that there's positives as well involved in the change. It just says affected, so whether affected positively or negatively. So for example, the individual houses in the main street, we've blocked them out individually so they no longer appear in a commercial zone, so that, which, is that correct? Still, the mapping went in and around residences, did they not? So that we could cut them out of a commercial zone and put them back in a residential zone. Positive.
Positively affects them.
People can borrow with a substantially lower deposit to buy a house there now where they couldn't before. All right, so I guess I'm just highlighting that particular thing, councillors, because there will be a flood of letters hitting individuals, and for a lot of them, it will be perhaps a little bit confronting, no matter how well we word the letter. It's like, oh, so that process for them to, like, we need to, when they respond, hopefully they all come through the formal channels, but if they respond to you in any way, please make sure that you steer them in the direction so that we can capture that feedback and provide us a snapshot, provide the staff a snapshot of it so that we can ensure it's captured. It is critically important to the success and ministerial sign-off on this that we undertake this community consultation correctly. So if someone bails you up at the IGA and wants to understand what it is or provide you some feedback that it's all a load of rubbish, for whatever reason, please drop an email through to the staff or onto the website or however is the agreed process and ask them to do the same. But we need to capture that so that we can correctly analyse it and provide that feedback to the state. Because if they learn of it retrospectively, it could seriously impact our ability to put it through at all, let alone by a December deadline. I don't think there's too much in the planning scheme. In fact, I'll rephrase that. I'm confident that our planning scheme is quite positive for current residents and current users, with the exception of the flood zone in Alpha, which I make no apology for. It's just that this hasn't happened in a lot of these people's living memory, and this process has never happened. You know, the last time a planning scheme was introduced, the format for doing so looked vastly different to what it does now. You know, we're talking in the early 90s in some towns' cases. So we just don't want people to feel challenged in their, or threatened, I should say. It's just a formal process we have to go through. But good, bad feedback doesn't matter. We need to make sure we get all of that, please. Too much work gone into this to fall over because somebody had a whinge at you in front of the IGA and we didn't capture that.
Mr. Mayor, the letter is going out on behalf of the Barcaldine Regional Council.
Yes.
Is the real planning, would that be mentioned? That'll obviously all be mentioned in the planning and the scoping and the planning and everything. Is it only just Barcaldine Regional Council that's sending the letter out?
Because real planning may as well be wearing our shirts for this. They're just a contracted agencies. They're not the state regulatory agency. They work for us. So, you know, they're just like, I mean, other councils have 15 real planning working for them.
They'll be with us when we do community consultation, so that they'll answer the direct planning questions. So, yeah, they're working for us in that sense.
And just on that point, Mr. Mayor, so in the communications or engagement methodology, there is no requirement to have public meetings. However, as you can see later on, we've planned to have those during this consultation phase so that we can give out information at those meetings. But it's not a specific requirement.
And my thoughts with them are that people will have individual queries about their lot on plan or something. What we need is to have the information sitting there for them specific to what they need. So this is what currently would happen if you wanted to do that here. Under the new scheme, if you wanted to do that here, this is what will happen. And it changes from community to community, of course, because we've got 3 planning schemes. So in Aramac and Muttaburra, what you can do on this size block or whatever is totally different to what you can do in Barcaldine to what you can do in Alpha and Jericho. And in a lot of cases, the differences are more stark between the 3 schemes than they are between what we've proposed and the old scheme. Like, we've met in the middle on things like acceptable lot size, for example, is now harmonised across the council area. Setbacks on farming land for all manner of things like intensive industry, feedlots, housing development, that is now harmonised. And the difference between the draft, with the exception of the flood zone and Alpha, the difference between the draft planning scheme and the current planning scheme is not as substantial as the difference between the Barcaldine Shire plan and the Aramac plan and the Alpha Jericho plan. I'm not saying foreign, but it's just the reality, because you did a very good job in meeting in the middle.
Mr. Mayor, a couple of other points. As you can see in the report, we do have to engage with the First Nations people. However, that won't be, the outcome of that won't be included in this stage of the planning scheme, because that will be an ongoing process.
It won't be included through formal First Nations inclusion, but if they raised issues unrelated to First Nations issues, they could be.
That's correct. But as a result of that consultation, if there are heritage sites that we wish to include, then we will have to amend the scheme in future. Just on the flooding, so we won't be notifying rural properties about flooding. It'll only be within the towns. It's too complicated to identify flood zones and the effect it will have.
Well, the state's accuracy on their flood mapping outside of urban areas in these central and northern catchments is non-existent. And I would suggest that should council try to put too much effort into that, there will be all manner of landowners put to the reality of the fact that we've got it wrong. So the planning scheme for rural areas and development within the flood zone is not anywhere near as prescriptive as it is for urban areas, for the logical reasons around town amenities being affected by and public amenities being affected by flooding in those situations, as opposed to private in the case of our rural land. So, Councillor Gleeson.
One more question, Mr. Mayor.
You have to.
The building applications that are currently in the process, in the planning scheme, will this interfere, will this be backdated, or is it as of?
So, Mr Mayor, to answer that, what we do allow some flexibility, Councillor Gleeson. So if someone applies now, or even through the short process, if they've applied and they don't comply with the existing planning scheme, but they will comply with the new one, we have accepted the development because we know that's the intention of council to allow that to happen. Thank you.
But from the date this planning scheme is adopted, anything that's lodged from 1 minute after the time that we adopt it gets judged by these rules, not the old rules.
Through Mr Mayor, so just querying that specific consultation with the First Nations people, Brett, so you're saying it's really ongoing and it's I was going to ask if that face to face, like, is it's different, yeah, thank you.
Further questions?
Through you, Mr Mayor, so the CEO touched on it, real planning will be at the plan is for them to be at our consultation. So most residents, landholders will have their notification, say a month or so, to chew over and mull over before we have our community consultations.
That's the plan. Try and get it out. Because
Okay.
Real Plan's committed to be with us as much as they can. That's important.
We'll, in our workshop later on, we'll workshop some diary days to see what's possible, what suits best. I would, in my mind, I'd envisage that you'd have real planning there to provide the technical advice to somebody who wants to know, and us there to receive the political feedback, or our staff, and ourselves, so that if they learn it's not up to real planning to justify why the changes happened. It's unrealistic to expect that, but it's also not their role, that's up to us. So the pointer here is remember to read the planning scheme before you go to these forums, and remind yourself, because it is a document, remember, that sits about that high.
My suggestion is we'll workshop it before we go out.
I just noticed, Mr Mayor, that the next point, the next item about the community engagement does say including information on the proposed planning scheme. I was really hoping that there was a planning expert
Definitely.
going to be there as well. But, yep.
And that. Sorry, Brett.
I was just going to wait till you get to that.
Yeah, okay. So, councillors, are we comfortable with this report to adopt the recommendation as presented? Consultation commence Monday 5 of September and conclude Friday 4 November. Thank you, Councillor Plum, who moved. Seconded. Councillor Rogers. Those in favour? 7-0. One more bridge cost, Brett. Right. You wanted to make a point here, Brett?
Mr Mayor, just with the timing, because the dates, so we've just suggested dates to start the process, but given that they're over 7 days, I don't know whether it's realistic that real planning would be able to be here for 7 days. The way that we've set up the community consultation.
So we've got them running from the 10th of October till the 17th. Is that right?
The council meeting's on the 11th.
Yeah. We've got too much then. Can we bring them forward a week and do 2 a day? In realistic terms, we could do Barcaldine, Aramac and Muttaburra in one day and Alfred and Jericho the next day on their way back to the plane. Like, I would never consent to a community engagement forum on broad terms being held before 5 o'clock, but for this stuff, we want this during work hours. I don't want tired officers, tired councillors, tired people discussing this. I don't mind if we even do a follow-up round of annual engagement forums at a later date. I don't mind that. This is just way too important to have I think it needs to be separated so that we don't sideline the purpose and clear intent. This is one of the more monumental things this council will hand down. Any council hands down as a planning scheme. Like, it possibly will go through without being politically charged, but like, they ride in the streets in some communities over changes to the planning scheme. We need to make sure that we give ourselves and the community the best possible chance to understand it. And I think that that there's other opportunities. It's not their only way to engage. That there is obviously other forums, but if we're going to undertake public stuff, we need to do it face to face in work hours. And realistically, given the size of our community and our population, we probably don't need more than an hour or 2 on this express item if we left everything else off the agenda.
I guess if I can add through the planning scheme is probably the most important document of council, because it guides our future infrastructure, our roads, our populations. So it's very important to set the framework for the future of this area.
I'm wondering, the week commencing the 26th or the week commencing the 3rd? So the last week in September or the first week in October? For your FYI, they are one school, sorry?
The third Monday's a public holiday.
Correct.
And the Friday's a public holiday.
The Friday before the 30th is, yes. But if we're only doing it over 2 days, we could grab, and for your benefit, councillors, if you think it may influence one way or the other, the week commencing the 26th is the last week of school holidays. Right, out the 26th out. So the week commencing the 3rd, could we try for the 4th and 5th?
Yeah, I'll be one of the 6th.
Officers, any reason why the 4th and 5th couldn't work? October. Oh, you can have it earlier, but I think we need time to get this
We need
right.
time to get the letters out.
Yeah.
Time to get maps on websites.
So through you, Mr Mayor, at this stage, this community engagement forum is more likely to be specifically about a planning scheme, and then potentially we'll do, are we still planning to do like our rural sessions as well?
Yeah, that's why it'd just be too congested. I think if we change this to that we conduct community engagement forums for the express purpose of the proposed planning scheme, and then we look at November, December, probably November-ish for our rural visits and turn up for the community stuff in the evening.
I agree with you, Mr. Mayor.
I don't like travelling for no reason, but I don't want anyone to ever say that we shut down discussion on this to hear something or they weren't given the right or the opportunity. I really appreciate what officers have proposed here, but the other problem I've got is the most important document we'll hand down, having officers working from 5 till 7 at night on receiving the feedback, and 7 days in a row. So sorry, Brett, to propose a change, but I'd
No,
sooner.
that's fine. Mr Mayor, we just put dates up as a starting point.
I think if we go for today's resolution being the 4th, 5th, if officers identify or councillors do some real reason, we've got the chance at the September meeting to slightly tweak that, but we won't really, because in the written correspondence, they'll need this. So no, we're sort of going to have to stick with the date we come up with today. You're right.
Yeah.
Councillor Plum, will you be available on the 4th to the 5th? It's not imperative that councillors be there. obviously would be desirable, but not imperative. Councillor Plum, you're Councillor Arthur.
Oh, I'm right, Mr Mayor, but is it fair on officers if we've got public holiday on the 3rd? It'll just mean they'll have to be well prepared, like the Thursday before Friday.
And I think mainly they'll be the contractors. So, you know, the technical stuff here is coming from real planning.
We're always prepared.
Councillor Hinton,
At this stage, I should be right for that date, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Gleeson. So, can we drop the 5 dot points out altogether to allow the staff to work out which town's which date? And we just put that they occur on the, so if we start at the start of the resolution, please, Debbie, go to the, so that council conducts community engagement forums, so drop its annual, for the express purpose to discuss the proposed planning scheme on the 4th and 5th of October. Full stop. Should we put in there that council delegates to the CEO the power to determine venues and times, or that's just implied to give it? Right, I'm happy to leave it simple as that. We'll have 3 on one day and 2 on the other. We'll work out which is which. I would suggest, I said Barcaldine, just thinking aloud here, I said Barcaldine, Aramac, Muttaburra. Barcaldine's probably the biggest centre, so it's probably better done on a day where there's only 2 maybe. But then Alpha's the biggest affected community. Officers can work that out. Moved, Councillor Plum, seconded, Councillor Peoples. Debate? None. Those in favour? 7-0. All right. This nursing agreement. Brett's report's pretty, which doesn't have to be long because it's to the point and it's accurate. However, the document that's been provided, I have some issues with. Not that we provided it, it was drafted by Mr. Ellison on behalf of. Well, I don't know that we need to debate, because we'll be here till 6 o'clock tonight if I was to go through line by line my concerns. I wonder if we debate the intent of engaging the Central West Health Service, and should we support to do that, we then delegate to negotiate the contract rather than approve the signing of this one. Or I'm happy to go through line by line, yes, close the meeting and go through it. But I just feel there's a couple of issues broadly with the contract that have it too heavily weighted in favour of the contractor here. That's my only concern. Well, let's just discuss the issue. The contract may be irrelevant first. So let's discuss the issue and keep an open session. I'm happy for that. And then if councillors are moving towards, if we clearly have support and the contract becomes an issue, then we can discuss the contractual issues. There's no point drilling into the contract and then you vote against it. So that's just wasting everyone's time. Councillors, I do want you to bear in mind that this is a sensitive issue. I can't see a reason within the provisions to close the meeting, but there are issues around patient-client confidentiality that some councillors may be aware of through their own personal experience or conversations. I ask you to bear in mind that you be careful with your comments in that respect. And it also deals with our provision of a federal program. So we just need to be careful what we say in public forum with respect to our personal experiences here. Comments? Brad, I guess rather than me talking, can you just outline why it was that council thought it would be better to engage a health provider to provide the nursing service rather than us re-engaging as we did before, have done previously in this space, around nursing support and clinical oversight and that sort of stuff? Can you just perhaps outline that? Do you recall that conversation or?
So, Mr. Mayor, was based on two factors. One, once the long-term nurse in Alpha no longer worked for us, that we had to make a decision whether to employ another nurse. We're only funded for 15 hours a week by the federal government. So, one, it was difficult to, people are looking for full-time work, they're not for 15 hours a week is very minimal work contract. Also, the issues of supervision. We have no ability to supervise a nurse. We don't know. It's not our business to know what qualifications or training are needed and providing direct health care.
Clinical governance, I think, is the phrase used.
It's high risk for council. At the same time, the Jericho Nursing or PHC, the Old Bush Nursing Centre, was reducing the number of hours that they were going to be providing services, and since then it's probably reduced further. I'm not sure what the situation is there.
So it hasn't, I need to clarify that. To the best of my knowledge, the formal hours have not been reduced. Like the hours are still there, but they can't staff. They've got HR issues to meet their posted hours. So the doors are not open for the amount of hours that's budgeted for, not politically, but because of HR. So you're right, but it's not a conscious decision to reduce services.
So we had discussions with Central West Health, came to us just to have a discussion about how could we support Jericho, and so this proposal came about from that, is that, well, if we can provide funding, our funding to provide a nurse that can cover Alpha and Jericho, then it will assist to cover some of that shortfall in Jericho. We actually drafted a contract and sent it to Central West Health. They sent it to the solicitors. They weren't happy with our wording, which is why they've come back with their own proposal, which they approached me and said, do you mind if we write the contract? And I said, yeah, that's fine. Get your solicitors to do it. So they've done that, and that's the contract that's come back. So basically it's to help Jericho, to get hours of nursing into Jericho. It's to get the program back into Alpha, and because we don't provide nursing, we're not qualified to provide nursing, and they are.
I just want to expand on that Jericho bit a little bit. This is not cost shifting, like it sounds like, but it's not. It's because their position's not full time either. An attraction of somebody to the community to undertake a part-time role in the case of Jericho was difficult. Now, obviously, Central West Health had been in a fortunate position where they had a local resident fill that nursing role for a long time, so they didn't have, attraction wasn't a worry. She was retired from her position at almost exactly the same time as our nurse resigned, retired from our position. Clarify that both times there I said retired. So the opportunity here was, we have funding given to us by the federal government to do a part-time nursing role, which could complement the funding that the Central West Health Service has to provide, so that there's a full-time position that can be created in the communities where nursing is needed. Our nursing is nursing from the home, as Brett said, at 15 hours a week. The Central West Health nursing is nursing from the clinic on their agreed time frames, and I'm not going to recite them off the top of my head, but it's there's a doctor day, half a day a week, and then complementary days with nursing provision in the clinic for a few hours either side of that. So that's where the mutual beneficial. We are not paying for, sorry to cut you off, Brett, but I want to make it very clear that this funding is not going to pay for a nurse to be in a Queensland health facility. Well, I don't think that'd even be allowed under the federal scheme. This is to pay the nurse who may be, and it may be a number of nurses fills this role. That's the provider's responsibility. But this allows the position to work in 2 locations under 2 different funding streams and attract 1 employee or a number of employees in a more reliable rostered basis. Was the conversation we had with Anthony and Luke and others at the time when that first kicked off. Sorry, Brett, I cut you off.
I was just going to add, Mr. Mayor, that yes, this service still can only be provided to CHSP clients.
That's right.
So they can't have a child come in and the nurse would be paid to provide a service to them under our program, but they could be paid under Central West Health program to provide that service. So they can perform a dual role, be the aged care nurse and community nurse.
There's one other point, and I'm sorry, councillors, we are monopolising this, but it's important that you understand the entirety of the background because this can look like something it's not, and I really want to emphasise that. The other problem we did have is our employee that had occupied this position was notoriously never on leave. However, when that individual chose to take leave, backfilling a nurse when there's no other nurse in your organisation is a challenging responsibility to execute continuity of service delivery, as we encountered through significant periods of 2020 and early 21, as completely removed from so many other facets of what we do. If a grader driver goes on leave, we grab somebody to step up. If a truck driver goes on leave, we do the same. If an administration officer goes on leave, someone backfills. So when there is literally only one position, having a permanent support for annual leave, sick leave, annual leave, yes, that can be structured a little better, provided there's significant notice given. We can and did fill that in a temporary time during annual leave. However, sick leave can present the morning that they're supposed to be at work and there's all of a sudden somebody not being treated, and can and did. So, whereas if this is a rostered contracted service, which is where I do have issues with the contract, the obligation is on the health service who have multiple nurses at their disposal to ensure our clients receive their treatment as scheduled, when scheduled, without rostering service issues. But anyway, we can probably drill down more, but that gives you some sort of a snapshot as to the lead up. And this has been an elongated process. We commenced it before our employee left us, and it's taken till in very recent time for this to be presented. Councillor Beckles.
Mr Mayor, I probably am in favour of it, but I would like to hear your concerns, so I'd probably at some stage want to go into closed session.
Conceptually, you're happy with the idea of us engaging a provider to do the nursing services, so?
I am in favour, but before I vote on it, I'd like to hear the concerns.
Definitely. And I'm not sure we even need to go into closed session. I'm really want to stay as transparent as we can with this because it is a burning issue with our community at the moment, and I don't want to hide behind the veil of secrecy to discuss a technical issue, if I can help it. Councillor Gleeson.
I'm in favour.
Councillor Hanson.
I'm in favour.
In principle, Mr Mayor, yeah. Like if it's shifting our risk and it's providing better services to Alpha and Jericho, then yeah.
If I could just talk to that point, that one word you just used, better. I don't know that it'll be better in terms of the quality of clinical care, but in terms of continuity of care, this has the very real potential to be better than what we have been able to deliver.
It's probably the wrong word to use.
No, but I think it's a clear point of difference there that the clinical, there's never been any allegation that we haven't provided first-class clinical care, other than when we couldn't provide it, if that makes sense. Councillor Plum.
Yes.
Okay. I don't control whether we go into closed session. I want to just, that's the vote from the floor, and will require a motion because at this stage I won't ask for it. Just a couple of tic-tac things though, in that there's some discrepancies discrepancies in the contract, specifically if you go to page 6 of it, 5.1b, where it says that BRC will process the police checks if requested. That's okay, whatever. That comes at a cost, but I'm not in the ditch over that. But then 2 pages over on the top of page 8, 5.3e 4, it says Central West Health Service will ensure that those personnel have undergone police checks in accordance with the requirements. So if we're going to process them 2 clauses earlier and then yet Central West Health have got to make sure they've gone through it, that's a tic-tac thing that I just, and then point 5 in that same clause refers to have provided a copy of their police check to BRC prior to commencing. Well, if we've processed it, we've already got it. That's a technical, that's not an immaterial thing, but it is material enough that I have concerns. Could be worked through negotiation.
I think we just need to look at the contract in its entirety.
But if I can go to this, and I definitely want this conversation to happen in open session, there's reference to the clinic, which if you look in the definitions, is not spelled out, but is referred to and commences being referred to in 5.2b. The Central West Health and Hospital Service will be entitled to determine in its absolute discretion the appropriate location for the provision of nursing services to the clients, and may change the location for the provision of nursing services for a client from time to time. Then 2 clauses further down at the top of page 7, it acknowledges that the clinic provides public health services. Note the introduction of the word clinic at that point. Provides public health services including urgent health services. Depending on other demands on the clinic services, BRC accepts that it may be necessary for Central West Hospital Health to reschedule nursing services for clients or place clients on a wait list for nursing services. If the nursing service cannot be scheduled within a reasonable period due to public health service demands, as assessed in its absolute discretion, promptly notify BRC. Now I get that. I get ED more than I do B, about at its absolute discretion reschedule. Where it becomes relevant is if you go to Schedule 1 of the agreement. I'm not bouncing around, it's page 18 of the contract, I don't know what page of your agenda, sorry. Comes after 19, section 19. Item 1, the location refers to a detail that says nursing care can be delivered in the client's home, the clinic or other location at the election. It is expected that they will be primarily delivered in the client's home. Now the last sentence gives me good heart there. I'm not suggesting that there's anything untoward from Central West Health in what they're suggesting, but I think the contract allows significant wiggle room around their responsibilities that I think should be tighter. And if there's legitimate reasons why not, then I'm happy to accept that because they're still getting treated. Yes, we're in open session.
No, it's just that one's...
Oh, we've lost that screen.
No,
It's dead.
It's close.
So,
idle TV.
I'm happy for those things to be teased out because it's very important to the people who receive this how it is they're going to be treated and where and what, and so if it's our expectation that the service may move and understanding at the commencement of this that the treatment received may move to the clinic rather than be received in the home, we need an eyes wide open approach to that. And we probably need other elements of our community care services team to understand that because there will be transportation involved in doing that. So, I'm not dying in the ditch about the decision, but I am just saying that there's elements of it that I think, whether it's clarification or further scrutiny, we need to be a little bit tidier on. So I'll just ask if anyone wants to comment on that. Brett, sorry. Do you have any feedback from them that's relevant to this?
No,
No, sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, is there a separate agreement for Jericho?
no.
Because Jericho is not included at all in that agreement. And it says the clinic is the Alpha NPHS.
That's in Schedule 1, there's point 4.
Yeah, so page,
It
yeah.
says Alpha.
Schedule 1 for clinic is Alpha MPHS.
We probably need to tighten that up, see what the explanation there is. It could be because of the style of those facilities, like the MPHS is a 24/7 man facility, whereas the PHC is not. So, yep, a bit more information on that one. What that means, and I know the intent is to service clients in Jericho, so we need to make sure that this document captures that.
Contractually.
Has to be in writing, that doesn't it?
Definitely has to be expressly included as much as not excluded, yes. Okay. And my only other issue, oh well, that's not fair. My only other significant issue deals with section 8. Commencing on page 9 of the agreement. That's the section to do with fees and payments. Section 8 of page 9 of the.
Okay.
So, eyes wide open again, and this is why I'm happy for this to all be publicly known or understood, because it deals with the acquittal of federal funding via a local government to a state agency, which is almost completely unheard of. It says that Central West Health will invoice BRC on a quarterly basis and in advance. Then if you refer 2 sections down to clause 8.4b, we do not, under this agreement, have the power to withhold, make deductions or set off payment for any reason. Refer further to section C. If any amounts under an invoice are disputed by BRC, we must pay the undisputed amount of the invoice on the due date, and that the Central West Health Service may suspend nursing services until all undisputed payments due for the services are received. So D and C contradict each other. C says that we've got to pay the undisputed amount. Oh, well, they don't really contradict each other, but I then want to go down further to 8.5a, where we acknowledge that they will employ the nursing service to perform anticipated levels of service and will incur in costs of such employment regardless of whether the anticipated levels of nursing service are in fact supplied. I do have a problem with that. I understand what they're saying, that to have an employee in that position will come at a cost, the police checks, so on. But if they're not hitting their targets, that's why you have a contractor. They have to bear the cost of that, or the responsibility. If we wanted that to be the case, then we would engage the nurse, I would have thought.
Yeah.
And then B is also relevant under 8.5b, in my opinion, in that the event there are fewer hours of nursing services anticipated by this agreement and BRC has funding recalled, BRC agrees it will not seek repayment of the fees paid. I think we need to be careful that we're not committed to paying the state something the feds might, for any reason, political or otherwise, take away from us. That way, in effect, we would be funding the nursing care for individuals. So, basically, the way I interpret that is we'd be paying for a service in advance with no right of recourse in the event that didn't happen, which effectively we're paying the federal government's money to the state government for a service that may or may not be delivered, and that's the bit that I think we need to circle that chain a little better.
Mr. Mayor, can I suggest we change the resolution so to say that council delegates to the Mayor and CEO to contract with Central West Health and Hospital Services?
Okay.
Would you include a minute?
Well, I could just go to the CEO.
I'll just go to the CEO.
Well, yeah,
Doesn't
whatever.
have any contractual powers.
So, well, I just think that the rest of the contract is pretty good. Like, deals with things around intellectual property, deals with stuff around media announcements. It's pretty good. Media Ellison have done a very good job, in my opinion. But on just those 2 areas, I'd like to see the circle closed a little better on, making sure that we're not financially committed to something that we have no say over whether there's continuity of funding for, and that our clients' expectations around where they're going to receive this are known upfront. Like, if they have to, for some reason, move the service to the hospital on a given day, and they know that and we handle that, so be it. But when it changes without notice at their absolute discretion, without any input from us or the client, I think we've got to check that that's not even a breach of the My Aged Care Act, where the client has the power of choice. So that's just a couple of technical things. But the spirit of the document, the spirit of the agreement, I have no problem with. In fact, I commend Central West Health for the work they've done to work with us on this. It's just technically, I think we need to tighten those things up. I agree totally with the recommendation that this is a specialised service. So therefore, there's no requirement for the exemption is valid for quotes and tenders not being required in this space.
Was this contract you want to negotiate?
Negotiate and enter into. And I think everything I've just raised probably falls within the guidelines of the Commonwealth Home Support Program anyway. You know, like there's nursing service funding that we'd be paying back currently because we're not delivering it. Is that right?
Yes.
Or do we? Yeah. So the program's rules state if you don't deliver it goes back. But if this agreement to me just got to be clarified that we're not paying for something that's not being
We're
delivered.
still paying it. So it won't, the funding will have to go back, but we will pay for it.
Then it's a true loss to us. So that, I mean, the initial thing here probably was close enough, but we've just clarified it, put it on public record if we go this direction. But as I say, I fully support it to the point that I'll move it if I have to. But I just wanted you all to be aware that we've just got to tighten a few of those.
And Mr. Mayor, in defence of Central West Health, they have a number of contracts, large number of contracts with providers, and they've got a template contract, so they've modified it to suit us, which is where some of these things may not quite fit.
Totally agree, and a lot of those other contracts wouldn't deal with prescriptive elements of a federal program like this one does. So that's the difference. Yeah, I'll defend them fully on it, but my primary responsibility is to defend council's due interests, and then of course very cognizant of the concerns of clients in this space. Does any councillor wish to add further comment or issues that you've raised, may have identified?
Through Mr. Mayor, the person or persons that are filling this position, they could be based in Barcaldine, couldn't they? Like they're not necessarily based in Alpha or Eureka.
It's unlikely, it could possibly, but unlikely because you have to go out to the home, so.
Central West Health won't want to be paying a nurse because they'll have to pay them from the minute they leave here, and we're paying them a fixed amount. So their service delivery will be impacted, their profit.
Travel time's not included, so.
That was going to be a question, Mr. Mayor.
That was going to be.
Clinic or house hours that we pay for and not travel?
So other elements of a CHSP program can offset travel, personal care, but nursing not.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I did see in the end, it was on provide the service Monday to Friday, but the emergency services on weekends, so really,
Yeah. Our service is currently that as well. It was a Monday to Friday, and no, we didn't have provision for emergency service. So, yeah, it was dead set Monday to Friday when we did that role. A couple of hours a day with 4 days a week. I think she had 1 day off.
But through you, Mr. Mayor, there's nothing to say that the normal position resides in Alpha, but if there's issues in Alpha, they'll backfill from here or Longreach or Emerald or. Yeah.
They wake up
and
one
that's
day.
up to Queensland Health and Central West.
That's the beauty of this.
They're a bigger organisation. That they would hope for, like, even though Queensland Health across the state have issues with recruitment for nursing and all that, we're going to have even more trouble because we only want to try and employ, and you've already mentioned, a part-time position with no guarantee of other hours, whereas hopefully Queensland Health, because they're in that space, can utilise this to sustain a full-time position or multiple other staff fill the role.
Yeah, I think you've hit on a very important point that we highlighted there at the beginning. This is mutually beneficial to both Central West Health, in my opinion, and the clients of the CHSP service, which will happen to be our ratepayers. So, yeah, I think it's got the potential to be very positive, and possibly even utilised elsewhere if the demand for it. Currently, we only offer this in that nursing service in this area, though, in those areas.
No, Mr Mayor, I think it's just really good initiative of getting that continuing service in Jericho. People have been worried about that for a long time, and this just solves that problem. They've done this before in Jericho with teachers. They had the same problem. Only had 2 or 3 days they're paid for by the state. The community raises the rest of the money, keep that teacher in there, and basically that's we're doing the same thing. I hope that it does really well, and great if it works. It'd be great to roll it out elsewhere as well. Other people can use us as an example.
Okay. Do I have a mover then for the recommendation as amended? Councillor Plum, or it's not amended, as presented now. Councillor Gleeson, second. Debate?
Mr Mayor, I'll just ask another question. The Commonwealth Homes support program, they've got no issue with this also being sort of, you raised the cost shifting issue there before with this going to, a state department. So we've got all the go-aheads there from that department.
We are still, so the answer is we are still the provider.
Yep.
We are just contracting or subcontracting the employee level. So we are still the responsible party under our agreement with the Commonwealth Home Support Program. That bit's not altering. Who we're putting on the ground instead of a direct employee becomes a contracted employee. It happens to be commercial health, but it could be an individual nurse who, like we could find a nurse who wanted to put her own ABN in and provide her own clinical governance. So the answer is yes, because we're not actually changing our agreement with the Commonwealth Home Support Program in any way.
So if you're comfortable with that on...
Yeah, I am.
And it's similar, Councillor Peoples, say Meals on Wheels, we pay Central West Health to provide the meals.
Okay.
Even though it's funded through CHSP.
President said.
There is in this direct area, yes, that's correct. Yeah. Okay. All those in favour? 7-0. Thank you, councillors. We'll pause for morning tea, but don't move.